Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Utah Film Pod. This is episode number 3. My name is Josh Terry, and I'm here with Dani Hatch, and we're going to talk about movie stuff. How's it going, Dani?
That was a great question, and
That was a great...
I got psyched out too. I'm just like, man, what if we talk about the weather again? What has the weather been like? I haven't been outside in days.
I don't blame you. It's been a little crazy and scary lately.
Oh, that's true. Did you guys get any flooding or anything?
No, there was no flooding. Just gratitude for the moisture, whether the precipitation or the water.
My mother-in-law
Although,
actually texted us and said, "I'm so grateful for this moisture," and we're just kind of
just
riffing on that.
cringing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why is that a thing? That
I don't
phrase.
know. I don't know. It's just a word that, it's there and it's just become part of the vernacular, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, it's been so nice. Honestly, this summer has been so miserable in
Yeah.
so many. It's just been hot and nasty and awful. And, I usually try to get outside and do a lot of hiking and do a lot of, going out and finding places to take pictures. And I just haven't even wanted to go out. It's just, and my lawn is dying. And so I guess what you could say is it seems like a pretty good summer to go and to sit in an air-conditioned movie theater. So
Ooh, good idea.
yeah. Now, as I understand it, there are actually some local reasons to consider going to the movies. Should we jump in on the news there?
Yeah, let's do it. And I mean that is a huge thing. We can throw all our money at Disney and all the new Marvel movies and whatever, but there are a lot of local films that are lower budget that there were some really good releases, and I think we as good Utah citizens should support the local productions too, right?
You're
One film,
obligated.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
it's
I
you're
hope you all feel guilty now and just pay those theaters your money. One movie I haven't seen, but because it's coming out this weekend, is called Even in Dreams. It's a movie about a young aspiring artist who is moving to Nashville with her band to start up her music career, be a pop star and all that, right? And part of the plot is that she has this dream with her sister in it who has recently died, and her sister singing this song. And so, part of the movie is about this girl living her dream, fulfilling her dream, but also fulfilling the dream of her sister from beyond. So that's going to be coming out. That's starring Monica Moore-Smith as the main girl, Savannah Osler, who this is a huge passion project for her. She's a writer, director. She plays the sister who has died. And we also get some Osmond cameos, Nathan and Eric Osmond. There, there's, why are you laughing at that?
Is that on the poster? Featuring Osmond cameos.
Well, Osmond cameos.
Or is that going to be part of the rating? It's rated PG for adult situations and Osmond cameos. Is that, I don't know.
Ooh, that's a little, it ups the ante there.
Just be aware.
Oh, goodness. Also in this movie is Tanner Gilman of Studio C fame. And I'm not sure how big of a role he has in Even in Dreams, but he was in this other movie that I got to see this week that has been out in Utah theaters for a little while, but is now going to be in Idaho and Arizona. So anyone out there, look it up, because it was fabulous. I was really, really surprised with this film. It's called Once I Was Engaged. And for those of you who are familiar with Once I Was a Beehive, don't worry, you don't need to really be familiar with it to understand the story. But you're returning to the story of the high-strung antagonist of the last film. There's kind of this mother-daughter duo who are like the super Mormon-y, and we have to go by the rules, and we're going to be all over the top and everything. And so this story follows them as the daughter is going to BYU Hawaii. She just turned in her mission paper. She has this whole plan. And then her boyfriend of 6 months decides to propose to her. And so this kind of just flips all her plans upside down. She has to get her mom on board, which that's kind of a tricky situation there. But once her mom is on board, you better believe it's going to be the wedding of the century, right? And it was very fun. I mean, it's, again, that what it made me think of, Josh, is what you said last time with The Chosen, how sometimes the acting in a low budget movie isn't as great, so like that can kind of pull you out of it.
Okay.
And that's definitely the case here. Not necessarily with the leads. I think they were fabulous. They were really, really good. They just went full in with those characters. But it's more like a lot of supporting roles or background characters, especially like, you know, people who will show up for like one line. You kind of figure like, oh, that's probably, you know, a cousin or friend of a friend,
brother.
you know. Yeah, exactly. So it sometimes
so
that was a little
Huh?
weird.
Okay.
Some people who didn't have as much experience landing those comedic lines, but everyone else has a lot of experience in that comedic area, and it is very funny. One of my favorite forms of comedy is kind of that self-awareness, and especially with like the quote Mormon culture stuff, there's a lot of fun to be had there. And this movie is very, very accurate with some of those things, like especially right at the start with like the BYU Hawaii and having all the plans and everything. I'm like, oh, this is, you know, being in that age range, that's hitting a little too close there for comfort.
Oh, yeah.
But it's very, very funny. I went with my husband, and the theater was kind of empty. We went in the middle of the day, and of course this is more of a local film when there's other films you could go to, and so we were just like loud, kind of talking through it the whole time, cracking all these jokes back and forth, and it was really, really fun. But one of the best parts of how accurate it was I love how it showed the engagement period, and especially again within this cultural lens, because they have like a 2-month period to plan this whole thing out and to do all the traditions and everything. And I think this movie also nailed very healthy modeling of crucial conversations that I think everyone should have with, you know, when you get engaged with your fiance, with your parents, you know, even though chaos is of course going to ensue because it's a rom-com, right? It was still
it had a practical use. It was a there are instructions embedded here.
Exactly.
So I should say,
but that's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Well, I should say I haven't seen the movie. Now, I did see Once I Was a Beehive several years ago and enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. It's very much that same feel.
Well, and I wanted to ask a question because, you know, obviously not having seen it, the new movie, I believe the protagonist has changed, right? Because the girl who was the protagonist in the first film, the Beehive film, she's not the one who's engaged in the second film, right?
Yeah. So do you remember the camp leader girl who was kind of like the bad guy in it, sort of? Yeah. So that's the one who gets engaged.
Okay.
Bree, yeah.
So there is kind of a character shift in terms of like the protagonist role, but it's still the same characters and actors as the first film. The focus has changed.
Paris Warner, who was the lead in Once I Was a Beehive, she does come back, and she's one of the bridesmaids. So like you get to see a lot of the old cast. She was great, and she's really, really good in this one too. And that's another conversation, like talking with your friends to get a little bit of grounding, because you know you could be off in La La Land planning your wedding, but having your friends kind of pointing out like, hey, you know what, maybe let's look at this. And so she does have a good role in this movie as well. But with that change in protagonist though, it is a little sillier and a little more like in your face than the last one. Like the last one I feel like was more subtle because the protagonist was very mellow, you know?
Right.
She was kind of chill.
I mean, that was kind of the idea, was that she's kind of this laid back person in this very eccentric, over the top situation.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I could see that being different. So now the other question I have about it though is how would this stack up compared not just to Once I Was a Beehive, but to other similar movies that have examined, you know, different aspects of like church related culture, you know, because there's a lot, you know, there, but I mean, they've been making them for 20 years plus now.
Yeah.
And just because one of the things I specifically remember about Once I Was a Beehive was that it it came across quite well. Like I felt like it stacked up. It was one of the better in the range.
Yeah, no, this one I definitely feel is high up in the range. In a different way than the last one. I think the last one did a great job of being more accessible to those who might not be members, whereas this one, like, occasionally I'll throw in, like, oh, well, this is what a temple is, and, you know, stuff like that, but the jokes come flying so quick where you kind of have to know a lot of the lingo, I think,
Oh, okay.
in order to get it. But I think there's still something there for anyone. This one feels more, I'm going to try and make a comparison here, I hope I can explain it. I feel like Once I Was a Beehive was more like Best 2 Years, and then Once I Was Engaged is more like Singles Ward.
Okay.
Where
that
it's
makes sense.
like, Singles Ward is hilarious, it's classic, it's iconic, and I feel like this one is kind of like that.
Right.
But it's more like, it's definitely for this niche audience.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little less grounded. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard as much that this time that the audience is a little bit more narrow.
Yeah.
Which, you know, honestly, not always the best thing, but you know.
No, but you know what? I feel like for the audience that they have, it is so perfect for it, and I think other people can enjoy it too. Because, like, I mean, my husband's favorite character was the dad. Like, and I feel like any dad in the audience is like, oh, yep, that's exactly how my wife is, or oh my goodness, why do I have daughters? You know, like, I think there's something very relatable there,
Well,
too.
I can tell you why you have daughters, sir. It's actually your doing.
I mean, more like a, why me? You know? Oh, heaven's sakes. Yeah, so, but,
All right, so how many stars then? How many stars are you giving this thing?
This is why I never add stars to my thing. Because, like, for me, it's like, you know what? For a fun little date night for someone who might be, you know, in my demographic, like, 4.5 stars. Like, I think it's just so solid, so fun. But, like, do I think anyone who's not a member of the church is going to enjoy it as much? Probably not. There are issues with the budget that I talked about in my review online.
Yeah.
Because they had to be more selective with their budget is kind of what it felt like.
Okay.
But I do think that this should be a part of the young women curriculum, because I think every girl needs to be prepared for engagement in the kind of climate we grow up in, where it's like, this is actually more like how it is. You know, sometimes we kind of skip over the step where it's like dating, and marriage, but it's like, you know what, this is kind of a very important time. My engagement was 7 months long. We were living in 2 different cities. There were, you know, a lot of things that I wish I knew, and I think this movie, like, I related to it so much because it talked about those things, and I really like the educational side of it, and it's just fun, you know. It's not like amazing Hollywood, the cinematography, and, you know, this is gonna win an Oscar, but, like, it's fun, and it nails a lot of things with this culture.
Okay.
But yeah.
Nice. Well, I think that makes a nice transition into our review section for the podcast today. We've got a couple new movies to talk about, and well, one of which has been in the theaters for about a week now. The other one is just coming out this weekend. It is The Suicide Squad. Emphasis on the, because
the one and only, wink, wink.
But not. That's the funny thing, right? Is that it's not, and that's what is so strange and unique and fascinating and hilarious about this whole situation, because this, as much as I can think of, is a movie that exists almost exclusively as a do-over. Like, technically it is a sequel. Okay. It's not a remake. It's not a reboot, really, but it's definitely, like, it's what I'd call a do-over. So did you see the first Suicide Squad from 5 years ago, the 2016 one?
You know, it's funny. I was actually really excited for it to come out. I liked the trailer. Like, I thought, oh, this is a great idea, right?
Right.
And I didn't end up going to theaters the first week. And then by, you know, the end of that first week and
The
into the
word was
second
out.
week, word was out,
Yeah,
and I was
right,
like, you know
right.
what? I do not want to spend my money on that,
No,
right?
I think I would say that Suicide Squad was the most disappointing movie of 2016 for me personally. I
Mm.
saw what was probably the same trailer you did and thought, "Oh, wow, this looks like it could be a lot of fun." It's kind of this, they're bad guys, but it's kind of funny and it's
Great
kind of dark
cast.
and yeah, and this cool cast.
Yeah.
And then I saw the movie and just, what was that? That was not like there was humor in it, but it felt shoehorned in, which is logical because that's what actually happened. I mean, my really stripped down understanding of the situation was that you know Warner Brothers hired a company to put together a trailer for the movie, and they put together this trailer that completely changed the tone and feel and concept and made it seem like this humorous, kind of crazy, macabre thing, but the movie wasn't that, and so they went in after the fact to try to make it funny so it would match the expectations of the trailer, and we just got this mess.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so disappointed. Of course, the Suicide Squad is it is a sequel to that movie. Like a lot of the same characters and the same actors have continued over,
Okay.
but it is very clearly a attempt to get it right, so to speak, because of the problems with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the main way that they have done that is they brought in James Gunn to be the director this time, who you may know as the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And
Oh, so it's kind of matching that same
well,
tone.
and you can check your facts and your history to see if I'm right, but I believe that this happened while Gunn was on the outs with Marvel when they had he had gotten into trouble for some tweets or some social media posts from long ago, and he had been removed from the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And so he went over and was hired by Warner Brothers to do the Suicide Squad, and then of course afterwards, now he's back on Guardians of the Galaxy. So you know, he's making movies for all the comic book franchises. And anyway, it boils down to this: the Suicide Squad, the 2021 version, uh, definitely better than 2016 Suicide Squad.
Can you imagine if it was worse?
But
What that would have done? Oh
hold on,
gosh. Oh no.
still not a good movie. Um,
Oh no.
yeah, no, it's I don't know.
They just can't
There,
nail that.
and it's weird because I like the concept. I really like the idea.
Oh
It's
yeah.
basically like a superhero Dirty Dozen, right? The idea of you've got
Yeah.
all these criminals, and they're basically teamed up against their will and kind of obligated to go on these missions, and it should be this really fun thing that is just really cool, right? But yeah, they're just you know and I don't know if I can point the finger at DC, because DC's made some good movies. They've I
Hmm.
the Wonder Woman movie was good, and I enjoyed Aquaman, and I've been more forgiving of some of their movies. I really liked Shazam. I thought Shazam was a lot of fun.
Oh, I love that one.
um,
Yeah.
but with this, they just haven't got it yet. And maybe before I break down though, just in terms of, I mean, the concept is the same, right? So you've got these criminals that have various quirks and powers, and they basically get teamed up and offered that, okay, well, if you go on this mission for us, the government's telling them, if you go on this mission for us, we're going to knock 10 years off your sentence or whatever. But if you try to desert, we're going to blow you up, because they've all got, they're all connected to these remote bombs that Viola Davis can trigger at any given moment. Um, and so this time they've got a mission to go to this island nation that has just experienced like a political coup kind of overthrow thing, and the new people in charge can't be trusted, because I guess that like the previous administration was was friendly to the United States, but this new one is not, which is a problem because uh, they're overseeing this secret project called Operation Starfish.
Mm.
And if Operation Starfish gets loose, it's just, game over for everybody. And so now that there's a possibility of this project getting unleashed, and I don't want to say much about Operation Starfish because it's the thing in the movie that I really actually kind of enjoyed the most, and I think it is,
Mm.
if you want to see the movie, it's worth waiting for. So I'll be very vague and ambiguous when I discuss it, but um, basically the mission comes down to you're going to storm this little Central American island and overthrow this new leadership and try to get control of this operation. And so, and this happens early in the movie, so this is much of a spoiler, but kind of the early twist is that the Suicide Squad actually is divided into two groups. And the first group is made up of a lot of the characters from the first movie, and they're actually the distraction for the second group, which kind of sneaks in a little more clandestine fashion. The long and short of it is that Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie,
Mhm.
and Joel Kinnaman, who's Colonel Flagg, I think is his character's name. They were both in the original Suicide Squad, and they wind up teaming up with this second group, made up of like the new people for this movie. Like John Cena is in it, and there's a few other different characters. Idris Elba plays basically a stand-in character for the Will Smith character, because and again, I mean, like you can check my facts here, but so Idris Elba plays Bloodsport, who is a stand-in for Will Smith's Deadshot from the
Mhm.
first movie, because Will Smith couldn't come back for this one, but he might come back in the future, and so they're basically having this other Bloodsport character be a placeholder, and it's really weird because it's like it's the exact same character, just
Well,
with a
that's why
different
I was
name.
thinking it was like a
Yeah,
remake
no,
because
and
I
that's
just figured like,
right.
oh, well, instead of having Will Smith, we have Idris Elba
Right,
playing the
and
same
and
exact character.
it is a perfect illustration of what is wrong with this movie. It's just a mess.
Oh.
It's just so anyway. The long and short of it is that the kind of this new core team gets together. They are effectively, and this becomes even more poignant, now that James Gunn is at the helm. They are very much the Guardians of the Galaxy of the DC universe. They're, albeit it's not, they're not out in outer space. They're terrestrial,
Hmm.
but the idea is the same. It's kind of supposed to be this kind of funny, quirky, dark, motley crew. Because Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean, they're criminals as well, right? I mean, they were all
Yeah.
effectively bad guys who kind of came together and are starting to do good things. Um, and that's basically what's going on with the Suicide Squad, and it's just not, you know, oh gosh, I mean, I don't know. There are some things I really did like. Like I said, the Operation Starfish thing. The more you find out about that, and that's kind of responsible for the finale
Mm.
once you get there. But otherwise, it's almost kind of like this, apocalypse now like journey as they land on the beach and they're making their way to the capital city to square off with the new military leader and all this kind of thing, and there are just a lot of subplots and a lot of kind of parallel threads. So every once in a while it will cut back to like the government home base where Viola Davis is kind of running the show, and you
Mhm.
realize, oh yeah, those people are there too. And there's just so much going on that you have these transitions, and it's like, oh yeah, this is happening also. And that's never good, right?
Mhm.
And I realized that it's not always fair to just compare one movie directly to another. But when you bring James Gunn in, they're obviously doing that because they wanted him to put his signature style on Suicide Squad the way he did with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he has. Like his humor is much more apparent. There's more of a style and a swagger to it this time that works better. It's more funny. Not that it had to be, but at the same time, it also exposes the ways that Suicide Squad does not measure up to Guardians of the Galaxy. Namely, that there's really no focus in terms of character. It's just kind of all over the place, whereas Guardians of the Galaxy was still about, the Chris Pratt, Peter Quill character. And the story is just kind of a story. It's not really connected to some kind of greater thing like, tracking down the Infinity Stones or whatever. It's also, it's very R-rated. It's got, there's a lot of graphic violence that most of the time is played for laughs. It's usually meant to be funny. But there's also, it's, I don't know, it's really tough to describe, but there are times when profanity seems natural, and there are times when it feels like the characters are just using profanity because they just want to be as shocking and harsh as possible.
Yeah.
And it's distracting, and that's the way it feels here. I guess forced. It just feels forced.
Like they're trying to get that R rating by being as vulgar as possible.
Right. And then there's also some graphic nudity that I think more sensitive audiences will definitely want to avoid. So,
Fair.
But not just that the R rating is what ruins it. I think far from it. I think that, like I said, some of the comic violence, it's played for laughs, and you can get kind of a laugh out of it. But just as messy as the movie is, and it just still doesn't quite strike that rhythm that, and I don't know, maybe, I guess this is just inevitable that the DC and Marvel movies are going to be compared until the end of time, but where the Marvel movies all feel like they're on the same page, DC, it just doesn't feel like they've hit that stride even after all these years. And Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad, feels like another example of that. So I felt like this was kind of, in the 2.5 star out of 4 range.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I felt like, oh, well, we'll get James Gunn on board with this thing, and we'll get the movie we should have got 5 years ago. And unfortunately, it's better, but still not good.
Okay, that's fair.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to...
I do want to say that, since we started this podcast,
yeah,
it feels like that's kind of been the consistent vibe with a lot of these releases,
Yeah.
And so I will say that I did see a movie that I liked. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait and cover it in the next episode.
Okay.
Because it's not coming out for another week. In the meantime, we can talk about Jungle Cruise, which has been out for about a week or so now. And once again, and I didn't actually realize this at the time, I found this afterwards, and I guess this is just because I didn't grow up going to Disneyland all the time, but I guess Jungle Cruise is another ride adaptation, and which we can't completely snicker at anymore because Pirates of the Caribbean was pretty good.
Yeah.
The sequels were a little more debatable, but
that
the
first one was solid.
Yeah, the first one was a lot of fun. The first one was a lot of fun. I wish I could say that Jungle Cruise was as good. It's definitely not as good. I wrestled with this one quite a bit because I went in expecting it to be fun. I didn't think it was going to be like the greatest movie in the world, but I kind of went in anticipating that, oh, well, it's got The Rock and it's got Emily Blunt, and it's just a big budget Disney production. This ought to be good. Mm-hmm. And I guess I would say it is at best good with a lowercase g.
Fine.
Yeah, maybe fine would be a better term. Sad to say, it kind of, it felt like going through the motions, and maybe a good way to describe it is this is what you would expect a movie adapted from a amusement park ride to feel like. Like there just wasn't a lot of substance to it. I would shudder to think of what this movie would be without The Rock and without Emily Blunt, because even with them, it just seemed very forgettable. I think that you come away from this movie and in the years to come you'll remember that they were in it, but you won't remember a whole lot else. The whole it's a quest, right? It's a search for I guess there is a mythic tree hidden in the Amazon River down in Brazil that is supposed to have these mystical qualities where if you eat one of the petals, you can live forever and be immortal and all this kind of thing. So it's kind of rooted in this, you know, kind of classic adventure history of, because it starts, it's like the conquistadors are searching for this tree and you know, wind up getting cursed instead and all this kind of thing, and then fast forward to the future and well, this is actually so this is, the movie actually takes place during World War One. This is kind of the you know, early 20th century, and Emily Blunt plays this this doctor. She's a botanist, and she is, you know, she believes that this tree is real, but she's struggling to get her fellow scientists to support her efforts to go find it, partially because they think it's just kind of a crazy story, but also because she's a woman. And so there's a real strong theme about kind of women's empowerment, which is appropriate because it's set during kind of the women's suffrage, kind of first wave feminism. And then she winds up bringing, and so she's got her brother, who's played by Jack Whitehall, who's a British comedian. If you've watched him on Netflix, he does this series called Travels with My Father, which is really, really funny.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, more fun than this movie, unfortunately. But yeah, so she and her brother wind up going down to the Amazon. They're able to find this artifact that is kind of the key to starting the journey. And then the artifact is also being pursued by this German who's played by Jesse Plemons, who is the well, I know him from Friday Night Lights, the TV series, but he's also been in Breaking Bad. He's also been in he was in a really funny movie, kind of underrated movie from a couple of years ago called Game Night.
I love Game Night. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So he was the cop next door, the creepy kind of the weird.
Gosh,
right. So
really?
he plays So he plays this kind of bizarro German semi-military leader who is, you know, thinking that if he gets a hold of this tree that he can rule for generations to come. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, I think they said that he's like the grandson of the Kaiser or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. And so he's chasing after them. They're trying to find the tree, and in the process, they wind up recruiting Dwayne Johnson, who is this down on his luck tour guide living in Brazil, taking tourists on boat trips around the Amazon. Oh. And I think like the best part of the movie, sad to say, is just the awful array of puns that Dwayne Johnson uses during his tours. You know, because when we first meet him, he's giving one of these tours and he's just saying these, you know, I should have written some of them down because they're just dad jokes galore.
Although, to be fair, I heard that was a huge plus in adapting the ride because that's a big aspect to the ride.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, and that was fun. Like I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I wanted to like this movie. You know, I'm halfway through it and I'm thinking, "Oh, you know, I want to give this a positive review." Mm-hmm. But then something else would happen and you're like, "Oh,
I can't."
No, come on,
yeah.
come on. And so by the end, it was, you know, this wasn't a terrible movie, but it just wasn't that good. It just didn't really, you know, didn't do it for me. You know, they try to have some kind of twists and turns, but they really don't land. And it's just, by the end of it, just think, gosh, there just really wasn't a lot of substance to that. There really wasn't, you know, they would plug in some action sequences here and there. And I mean, some of the CGI was really fun. Mm-hmm. Because the Jesse Plemons, the Kaiser's grandson character, is one antagonist, but then there's also kind of like these supernatural, these supernatural conquistadors that come back from the dead, and they're trying to get to the tree as well. And some of the CGI with them is really great, but at the same time, there's also this CGI leopard thing that is supposed to be Dwayne Johnson's sidekick, and it looks awful. It's just like, it's really, really bad. And so it's distracting sometimes because, you know, like I mentioned, that one of the themes is Emily Blunt's protagonist. You know, she's kind of fighting against sexism. Mm-hmm. But then there are these other examples of where if you notice this sometimes, there's a tendency to want to set a film in a historic period, but have those characters act like they live in the 21st century.
Oh,
as far as
yeah.
their concerns and their ideologies and their, this kind of thing, because you know the Emily Blunt character is also like really hung up on animals being in cages, and she's always referencing it, and you're just thinking, I don't think she would have cared about that very much in 1918 or
Mm-hmm.
whenever this is taking place, right? And
Yeah.
so it's the kind of thing that, okay, well, audiences will, they might relate to that now, but 20 years from now, they're going to watch this movie and think, oh yeah, that definitely came out in 2021 because, this character is hung up on this even though this was 100 years ago. And,
Yeah.
and so it just adds up to something that doesn't quite fit. And it was disappointing because I love, Dwayne Johnson. I think in almost every case he adds to whatever movie he is in, and Emily Blunt has been awesome in pretty much everything I've seen her in. I'm even going back to oh my gosh, what was the one with Steve Carell?
Oh, Dan in Real Life.
Dan in Real Life. That's the one.
Yeah.
So
I
so
didn't
she
realize
played
that
because
came out
Emily,
so
yeah,
long ago.
right.
Dang.
Well, it was like 2007, I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dead on.
So yeah, so she's in that, and she's in the Adjustment Bureau, and
Yeah.
obviously the Quiet Place movie. And by the way, I saw Quiet Place 2, which maybe
What'd
we'll
you
have to talk
think?
about it another. Oh, yeah, I really liked it. Really
Okay,
liked it.
good.
But yeah, Jungle Cruise, pfft, no good.
But it wasn't
So,
like the fault of the actors necessarily. Like,
oh
if
no, not at
anything, they
all,
kind of
not at all.
helped a little, but
No, it was weak material. It
oh,
just there just wasn't enough substance to make it work, and yeah, so just a disappointment. But
yeah.
life goes on.
I've heard that the story was kind of a bit of a mess, like just throwing things in.
Yeah.
So do you think like the lack of substance made them feel like they were adding in a lot of things? Like just to try to give it
Well,
something?
okay, so this is going to turn into a bit of a segue.
Okay.
Um, you're watching this movie, and you're spending most of the time thinking about other better movies that do similar things.
Oof.
Which I always feel like, oh, maybe this isn't totally fair. I shouldn't be comparing every movie that comes along to the best version of that same genre, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I'm thinking this movie is no Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm.
Because it's got the whole, we got like the little trinket from history that is going to be kind of the starting piece towards the quest for this other thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you had to have Marion's medallion in order to go to the map room and figure out where the Well of the Souls was, where they built where they buried the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Jungle Cruise has this little arrowhead thing that is supposed to help you locate the place in the Amazon River where they've got the tree that gives immortality. And so it's kind of this similar type of adventure, mystery type thing.
Like the treasure hunt
And
kind of thing to
right,
thing,
right.
sort of.
Well, and at the same time, I mean, it's like, yeah, obviously it's a Disney movie, and so the tone is not going to be like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not going to be as dark. It's not going to be as serious. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be much more lighthearted. It's going to be more kid-friendly. Although I think this is still a PG-13 movie, which again, maybe that's another discussion for another time.
Oh wow, yeah, you're
Um,
right. It is PG-13.
yeah, which was surprising because it doesn't really come across as a very hard PG-13. It's pretty soft
Mm-hmm.
in terms of content, but yeah, so I'm thinking of that, and I'm thinking, okay, well maybe it's more like The Mummy, right? Because The Mummy was kind of like the poor man's version of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but even The Mummy I think had more going for it than Jungle Cruise, and so it wants to be part of this same action adventure ancient ancient mystery genre, but it's just out of its league. It really is. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's because it's based on a ride. I don't know if it's because they just didn't have an interesting enough story, which is too bad. I mean, it's funny. One of the conquistadors is Aguirre, this historical figure who actually Werner Herzog uh, made one of his first movies about this guy. It's called Aguirre, the Wrath of God, and it's like this classic art house movie from the 70s. That's just pretty intense. But and so it's kind of weird seeing like the Disney version of this character, who was Klaus Kinski played him in the Herzog movie. And wow, just if you want to kind of go off on a real crazy tangent, but yeah, just I think that it's going to be really really hard. Unless you're just kind of a kid who's detaching, and honestly, like I wouldn't just say, "Oh, it's fine because the kids will love it because they don't know any better." Like I've never felt like that's a very good argument for
Nah.
an inferior movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
My feeling is, hey, if they're telling you to go pay money for this, they need to earn your money, and I just didn't feel like Jungle Cruise was really bringing what it should have. They had a lot of good elements in place, but it just didn't really come together. And not it wasn't bad, like I think you used the word fine. I think
Yeah.
that's probably the most accurate way to describe it. Yeah, movie's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's
Like if you're bored
it's
one day and you happen to be on Disney Plus and
uh
it's free to stream,
right,
that might be
right.
fun. Yeah.
If there's very little sacrifice involved, and that would be a perfectly acceptable way of approaching it.
Yeah.
Which is far less than I could say for the next movie I want to talk about, which actually is going to introduce a new segment for the Utah Film Pod. Now, the funny thing about this new segment is that I don't actually have a name for it yet, and so, Danny, I would love to hear your thoughts, and if anybody watching has any suggestions, I would totally be open to this, because what I want to do is once per episode, I want to feature one film, and I wouldn't even necessarily say classic film. It doesn't even have to be good. Just some kind of a film that either was filmed in Utah or is about Utah or references Utah in some way. Just some example of how Utah has kind of made its mark in in the world of film. And so I don't know exactly what to call it yet. I mean, it could just be something as simple as the featured Utah film or the Utah movie of the episode, which just sounds awful. But the
We'll make it
idea,
as long and
yeah,
convoluted as possible.
well, gosh, yeah, and that might be the way we go, because it's just what's going to make sense. But I think that the concept will become more clear once we talk about the movie that I want to use to kind of kick off this featured
Mm-hmm.
segment, which is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So we were just talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I think Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which was the third movie in the trilogy, because it's just a trilogy and there wasn't a fourth movie, that never happened.
Someone's in denial.
That's very much so. So Last
It's
Crusade, I
fair,
believe
though.
it came out in 1989. And if you're paying attention, and if you're from Utah or spent any time in southern Utah, the opening titles are presented over a montage of some really famous southern Utah iconic sites. Specifically, almost exclusively, I want to say, in Arches National Park.
Yeah.
Was this is correct? So, because I remember seeing Balanced Rock very prominently, like because at the beginning of it's right, it's this throwback to Indiana Jones' childhood when he's a teenager, he's in the Boy Scouts, and he's out on this trip, and he and all of his friends are out, they're all on horseback, and this is where he discovers this. I think it was the Cross of Coronado that kind of leads to one of his first adventures. And as they're out on this scout trip, they're kind of wandering through southern Utah. And I remember thinking at one point that they also go through Monument Valley, but I don't believe they do. I think it's just in Arches, because you see Balanced Rock, and then they approach Double Arch,
Mm-hmm.
which is where the cave is. And I don't believe there's actually a cave there. I've been there a few times myself, and I think the cave was just kind of inserted later.
Yeah.
But that's
No
where they
cave, no cross of Coronado. What?
it's not in Arches, maybe somewhere else. Might be in this Hollywood studio somewhere in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. But no, and so just a real prominent, just a fantastic feature of a couple places. I mean, I've spent a lot more time photographing Balanced Rock than Double Arch, but man, and this is speaking as somebody who's a big fan, but I would almost say that Arches is my favorite national park in Utah, if not even just in general. Such a cool place, and if you watch that opening segment from Last Crusade, it's just a different world. It's like you're on Mars. It's crazy. But you've seen the movie.
Of course. No, I'm so glad you brought up Indiana Jones with Jungle Cruise, because like the whole reason why I'm interested in seeing Jungle Cruise is because of the style and the look of it just seems so Indiana Jones, and I can't get enough of that style, because like that was my trilogy growing up. Like I watched those movies so many times, and then like
They were so good.
yeah, and because I knew them by heart, that's when I started watching like behind the scenes, and then I realized like, oh, there's this whole world to filmmaking, and that's why I'm into it today, you know?
Yeah, there was a kid. So one of the kids, and my gosh, this was when I was in college at the University of Utah. I remember going to a party and meeting a kid who was part of that scout group. Like
Oh, no way.
I guess he grew up in southern Utah, and so when Spielberg came through to film those opening scenes, he wound up getting recruited to come ride his horse with these other kids, and so they got to spend a day or two, getting directed by Steven Spielberg, and he showed us a picture of him with the, with the director and all this kind of thing. But I wish I could remember his name. But
Oh, it's okay.
no, just a fun, just a really great way to in terms of showcasing what's cool about my home state. Indiana Jones and Last Crusade is easily one of the first and best examples to spring to mind.
Oh yeah.
Although, and this again, I keep hinting about like potential subjects for down the road. I would say that as much as I love Last Crusade, it's not as good as Raiders. I still think Raiders is easily the best one, and I only say that because I've heard people who've had the opposite opinion sometimes, who think
Yeah.
that Last Crusade is best.
Yeah,
And
Raiders is my favorite. I think there's something so fun and classic and just very
Yeah.
new and fresh about it. But I can see the argument. When we were talking about Suicide Squad, and how
Mhm.
there's not this central character or central idea outside of,
Yeah.
the main conflict,
Mhm.
I think that is a huge strength to Last Crusade, because it's all about that father-son relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Sean Connery, the movie is not the same without Sean Connery as the dad,
Mhm.
and I think the whole movie is actually about that. That's why we start in Arches on that Boy Scout trip, and
Right.
he's like, Dad, you gotta help me out, and he's just not listening because he's
But he's
obsessed with
count to 10 in Greek. That's how I'm gonna just go in your room and be really educated and don't bother me. That's funny. Yeah.
No, exactly.
No, and that that kind of brings us back to as we think about what we've been talking about in today's episode. There's definitely a theme both in Jungle Cruise and in the new Suicide Squad, where you're definitely left feeling like, well, there are parts of this that are good, but I just think this other one did it better. And whether that's Guardians of the Galaxy, whether that's Raiders of the Lost Ark, whether that's Last Crusade, there's just kind of, I think about this in terms of music too, because I'm a big music fan, and I know that sometimes people will get really excited because so and so did a cover of this classic song, and it sounds so good, and then I'll listen to that cover and I'll think, it just makes me want to go listen to the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. It's nice that they did it, but I mean, I remember it's kind of funny, but like I remember listening to Michael Bublé. And at first kind of feeling, well, it's really cool that he's kind of keeping this old style tradition alive, this Sinatra crooner type thing.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I'll listen to his versions of a Sinatra song and I'll think, well, that just makes me want to go listen to the Sinatra version.
And then you go and listen to Sinatra instead.
Yeah, and like Suicide Squad just kind of made me think, this makes me feel like watching the better James Gunn movies, because it's that same style, but it's better, and Jungle Cruise, it's got some things going for it, but it just makes me think about how tremendously superior Raiders of the Lost Ark is. And in its defense, I mean, yeah, Raiders was this incredible movie, but it was meant to be a salute to these campy, cheesy, action movies
Yeah.
from decades past. And so, yeah, and so I don't know. I think there's a thin line between being a tribute to something where you're kind of nodding to the great things of the past and just reminding people that there are better options out there. you
Yeah.
know
Well, this is making me wonder now, because like anytime I do think of a tribute, it really, I think it does become distracting, because I feel like the new movies coming out that I really enjoy are ones that are completely original, like A Quiet
hmm
Place. It
yeah,
feels very unique,
right.
and I love that, especially in a world where we see all these sequels and reboots and everything. We
hmm
kind of crave that originality. So, is that a
Well, but
good
that's the funny
idea?
thing. Well, that's the funny thing though, is the answer to that question is Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it was
Hmm.
trying to be a tribute to something beforehand, and it exceeded it in every way to the point where it
Mm.
almost kind of ruined action movies going forward. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's really kind of the funny thing about it, is that, you know, or even, gosh, I mean, maybe something like Airplane, which is a satire of the disaster movies of the 70s,
Hmm.
but is what really kind of, pretty much created its own genre. Kind of like there's a very particular style, and gosh, this may be something we could delve into more deeply when we have more time. But
Hmm.
I would Airplane would be another one I would think that was created as a nod to something else, even though it was a parody or satire, which is different than what I think Jungle Cruise or certainly what Suicide Squad is trying to do.
Hmm.
But in terms of being a riff on an existing thing, but creating something of your own in the process,
Yeah.
Airplane, Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, those those awesome movies I grew up with. That's what's springing to mind. So any final thoughts for episode number 3, or you think we got this thing tied off?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really good about this.
Excellent.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
we've covered some good ground, and this time around, I actually kind of have a sense of what might be coming too. So the one thing I can tease is that I will be able to talk about a movie that I liked that came out.
Finally, we can get positive Josh in.
It's got to happen every few episodes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. This has been episode 3 of the Utah Film Pod. Be sure to leave comments, give us feedback. We'd love to know what you think, and if you have ideas for things you'd like us to talk about, or including potential titles for our featured Utah film segment, just let us know. And in the meantime, enjoy your August.
Enjoy those last moments of summer.